I was 33 years old when my parents finally stopped calling my veterinary degree a waste. But to understand why that moment meant so much, you need to understand what came before it. For as long as I can remember, my parents had one definition of success: money, prestige, and titles that impressed strangers. Watching from which country? Comment below. Like, share, and subscribe for more. My older brother became a corporate attorney. My younger sister went into finance. Family gatherings were basically award ceremonies for their accomplishments. And then there was me, the girl who wanted to help animals. I still remember the night I told my family I had been accepted into veterinary school. I was 22, excited and practically shaking with happiness. My father barely looked up from his dinner plate. "A veterinarian?" he said. My mother sighed. "All that studying just to work with dogs and cats?" Everyone laughed. I laughed too. At least, I pretended to. Inside, something cracked. Over the next few years, things only got worse. Veterinary school was brutal. I worked exhausting hours, survived on caffeine, and buried myself in textbooks while my classmates and I struggled through sleepless nights. But every holiday visit home felt harder than the exams. My father constantly compared me to my siblings. "Your brother just got another promotion. Your sister's bonus was bigger than most people's salaries." Then he'd glance at me. "And how's the animal business?" The words always stung. No matter how many surgeries I assisted with, no matter how many animals I helped save, my achievements never seemed to count. To them, I wasn't building a career. I was settling. The worst moment came shortly after I earned my degree. My family hosted a dinner to celebrate my sister's new job. Halfway through the evening, one of my father's friends asked what I did for a living. Before I could answer, my dad chuckled. "She spent 8 years getting a degree that pays less than a decent banker." The table erupted with laughter. Then he added the sentence I never forgot. "Honestly, that vet degree was a waste." The room went silent for a second. I felt every eye on me. I wanted to defend myself. I wanted to scream. Instead, I smiled, excused myself, and cried in the bathroom. That night, sitting alone in my apartment, I seriously questioned every decision I'd ever made. What I didn't know was that a single phone call, less than 2 years later, was about to change my life forever and force my parents to eat every word they'd ever said. The morning that changed everything started like every other morning in my clinic. I was wearing scrubs that smelled faintly of disinfectant, running 10 minutes behind schedule, and trying to calm a terrified golden retriever named Max before surgery. There was nothing glamorous about my life. No corner office. No luxury business trips. No six-figure bonuses. Just long hours, worried pet owners, and animals depending on me to make the right decisions. And honestly, I loved it. Even after everything my parents had said, I still loved my job. But loving it didn't stop the doubts. Their voices lived in my head. Every time I struggled to pay off student loans, every time I skipped vacations because money was tight, every time I saw my siblings posting photos from expensive resorts, the voice would come back. Maybe they're right. Maybe I chose the wrong path. That particular afternoon, I was reviewing test results when my phone rang. I almost ignored it. The number wasn't saved in my contacts. Normally, I would have let it go to voicemail. For some reason, I answered.
Hello?
A professional-sounding woman spoke. "Is this Dr. Emily Carter?"
Yes.
"Hi, Dr. Carter. My name's Rachel. I'm calling from a company called Petnova Biotechnologies. I had heard of them. Everyone in veterinary medicine had. Petnova was one of the largest animal health companies in the world. Their products were used in thousands of clinics. Their research influenced the entire industry." I sat up straighter. "Okay. We've been reviewing a research paper you published last year." My heart nearly stopped. The paper. I had almost forgotten about it. During veterinary school, I'd become fascinated by early disease detection in companion animals. The project had taken years. Most people never read it. Outside a small academic circle, it barely received attention. Yet somehow, this giant company was calling about it. Rachel continued. Our executive team would like to speak with you. I honestly thought it was a prank. About what exactly? There was a brief pause. We believe your research could have significant commercial applications. I stared at the wall. Commercial applications? My tiny research project? Nothing about this made sense. A week later, I found myself sitting inside one of the most impressive corporate headquarters I'd ever seen. Glass walls, massive conference rooms, technology everywhere. The entire building felt like something from the future. I kept thinking, you don't belong here. People like you don't end up in places like this. Then the meeting started. For nearly 2 hours, executives asked questions about my research. Detailed questions. Smart questions. Questions that proved they'd actually studied my work. For the first time in years, I felt something unusual. Respected. Not tolerated. Not patronized. Not compared to someone else. Respected. One executive leaned forward. Dr. Carter, do you realize how groundbreaking? I swallowed. Honestly, not really. He smiled. We do. The meeting ended. I thanked everyone. I assumed that was it. A nice conversation, an interesting experience, something I'd tell my coworkers about later. Then Rachel asked me to stay behind. My stomach twisted. I wondered if I'd said something wrong. Instead, she handed me a folder. Inside was a proposal. I read the first page, then the second, then the third. By the time I reached the financial section, my hands were shaking. I thought I was reading it incorrectly. I checked the numbers again, and again, and again. Rachel smiled. We'd like to license your research and bring you on as a lead consultant. I looked up. What? The executive board unanimously approved the proposal. I could barely breathe. The amount being offered was more money than I had ever imagined earning. Not just enough to pay off my student loans. Not just enough to buy a house. Life-changing money. The kind of opportunity that arrives once in a lifetime. For several seconds, I couldn't speak. Years of exhaustion flashed through my mind. Every overnight study session, every insult, every dismissal, every family dinner where I was treated like the failure of the group. All of it. Rachel must have noticed my expression. Are you okay? I laughed. Then I started crying. Actually crying, right there in the conference room. I was completely embarrassed. But I couldn't stop. Because nobody in that room saw me as the daughter with the waste of a degree. Nobody saw me as the disappointing sibling. They saw me as an expert. As someone whose work mattered. When I finally signed the agreement several weeks later, the deal became official. The announcement generated attention throughout the veterinary industry. Articles started appearing online. Professional organizations reached out. Interview requests arrived. My clinic coworkers were stunned. I should have been celebrating, and I was, but deep down, there was one thought I couldn't shake. My parents still didn't know. I hadn't told them anything. Not about the meetings. Not about the deal. Not about the company. Part of me wanted to keep it that way. Another part wanted them to know exactly how wrong they had been. As fate would have it, I wouldn't have to decide. Because less than a month later, my parents invited the entire family to a large gathering for my father's retirement celebration. Dozens of relatives would be there. Friends. Neighbors, business associates, and before that night was over, a surprise guest was going to walk through those doors and completely change the conversation. The same people who once laughed at my career would soon be staring at me in stunned silence, and my father was about to experience the most uncomfortable moment of his life. My father's retirement party was exactly the kind of event I expected. Expensive venue. Perfect decorations, a long guest list filled with successful people my parents loved to impress. The entire evening felt less like a retirement celebration and more like a ceremony, honoring my father's achievements. Every conversation seemed to circle back to careers, promotions, investments, and accomplishments. The subjects my family valued most? I almost didn't go. A part of me wanted to stay home. After everything that had happened over the years, Spending an evening pretending we were a happy family sounded exhausting. But I went anyway, mostly because my grandmother asked me to. Grandma had always been different. While everyone else measured people by money, she measured them by character. She was the only person in my family who never made me feel small. The moment I arrived, she hugged me tightly. "I'm proud of you," she whispered. The words nearly broke me, because she had been saying them for years, long before anyone else had a reason to. I smiled and kissed her cheek. "Thanks, Grandma." Then I walked into the crowd. Within minutes, the comparisons started. They always did. My father's friend Mark approached me with a grin. "So, Emily, still fixing puppies and kittens?" I forced a polite smile. "Among other things." He chuckled. "Well, somebody has to do it." The comment wasn't openly insulting, but it carried the same dismissive tone I'd heard my entire adult life. A few feet away, my brother was discussing a major legal case. People surrounded him, listening, admiring. My sister was sharing stories about investment deals. People hung on every word. Meanwhile, my profession remained the punchline. As usual, at one point, I overheard two relatives talking. One asked how I was doing. The other replied, "She's the veterinarian." The first person nodded. "Oh, right, the animal doctor." That was it. No questions, no interest, no curiosity. Conversation over. I should have been used to it by then. Yet somehow, it still hurt. About an hour into the party, my father climbed onto a small stage near the center of the room. Everyone gathered around. He began thanking guests for attending. Then he started recognizing family members. My mother, my brother, my sister, each received glowing praise. Then he looked toward me. For a moment, I wondered if maybe things had changed. Maybe he would finally acknowledge my accomplishments. Maybe all these years later he would see me differently. Instead, he smiled and said, "And Emily is still taking care of dogs." Laughter spread through the crowd. Not cruel laughter, but laughter nonetheless, the familiar kind. The kind that reminded me exactly where I stood in the family hierarchy. I felt my stomach tighten. Even after everything, even after the deal, even after the industry recognition, he still saw me as the kid who made a foolish career choice. My grandmother rolled her eyes beside me. She squeezed my hand. "One day, he'll regret that." I didn't answer, because honestly, I wasn't sure he ever would. The speech ended. People returned to their conversations, and I tried to convince myself not to care. Then my phone vibrated. I checked the screen. It was Rachel. My heart skipped. I stepped outside to answer. "Hey, Rachel." "Hi, Emily. Sorry to bother you." "No problem." She laughed softly. "Actually, I wanted to confirm we're still coming." I blinked. Coming? The CEO, 2 board members, and I are about 20 minutes away. I nearly dropped the phone. For a second, I'd completely forgotten. A week earlier, Petnova's leadership team had asked whether they could personally attend my father's retirement event. At first, I thought they were joking. They weren't. The company had recently launched the first phase of a project built around my research. The early results were extraordinary. Executives were excited. Investors were excited. Everyone involved was excited. They wanted to celebrate. I had reluctantly agreed. At the time, I didn't think much about it. Now, standing outside the venue, I realized exactly what was about to happen. My pulse accelerated. Rachel continued, "We should be there shortly." I swallowed. "Okay." After hanging up, I stood there staring into the night. A strange feeling settled over me. Not fear, not anxiety, something else. Anticipation. For years, I had imagined proving my parents wrong. I pictured arguments, confrontations, moments where I finally listed every accomplishment they ignored. But now that the opportunity was actually arriving, I felt surprisingly calm. Because I wasn't the one bringing proof. Life was 20 minutes later, the venue doors opened, and everything changed. The first person through the entrance was Petnova's CEO, a man whose interviews appeared regularly in business publications. a man responsible for leading a company worth billions. Behind him came Rachel and several senior executives. The room immediately noticed. Conversations stopped. People stared. My father noticed the attention and looked confused. Then he saw them walking directly toward me. Not toward him. Toward me. The room grew quieter with every step. When the CEO reached me, he smiled warmly. "Dr. Carter." Then he extended his hand. "Good to see you again." I shook it. "Thank you for coming." "Our pleasure." My father approached us, clearly trying to understand what was happening. "Emily?" I turned. "Dad, this is Michael Reynolds." The color slowly drained from his face. Recognition hit immediately. Even he knew who Michael was. Almost everyone in the room did. The CEO smiled politely. "You must be Emily's father." My father nodded.
Yes.
Michael grinned. "You should be incredibly proud." Silence. Absolute silence. The kind of silence that makes people stop breathing. My father blinked. "Proud. Your daughter's work is helping reshape the future of animal health care." Nobody spoke. Michael continued. "Frankly, our company considers her one of the brightest minds we've worked with in years." The room seemed frozen. I watched relatives exchange confused looks, friends whisper to one another. My brother, staring in disbelief. My sister looking completely stunned. Then came the sentence that changed everything. The CEO looked directly at my father and said, "The value Dr. Carter has already created for our organization is extraordinary." He paused. "And we're only getting started." For the first time in my life, my father had no response. No joke. No criticism. No comparison. Nothing. Because the person speaking wasn't me. It wasn't a family member defending me. It wasn't someone trying to be kind. It was a billionaire, executive leading one of the largest companies in the industry, someone my father instantly respected. The irony wasn't lost on me. For years, I'd been telling my parents my work mattered. They never listened. Now the exact same. Truth carried weight because it came from someone wearing an expensive suit. The executives spent the next hour talking with guests. Everywhere they went, they spoke highly of me, my research, my leadership, my contributions. Their respect was genuine and impossible to dismiss. People who had ignored my career for years suddenly wanted details. Questions poured in. How did the partnership happen? What exactly had I developed? What was the company working on? When did all this start? The attention felt surreal, yet the most shocking moment of the night hadn't happened yet, because later that evening my father quietly approached me alone, and the expression on his face was one I'd never seen before. Not pride, not confidence, not authority. Regret. Real regret. The kind that comes when someone realizes they've spent years judging a person they never truly understood. And what he said next would force both of us to confront a lifetime of wounds that had never fully healed. My father stood across from me near the back patio doors. The party was still going on behind us. People were laughing, talking, drinking. But for the first time all evening, I wasn't paying attention to any of it. Because the man standing in front of me looked completely different from the father I'd known my entire life. His shoulders seemed heavier. His confidence was gone. And there was something in his eyes I'd never seen before. Shame. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. Then he quietly said, "Emily, can we talk?" I nodded. We stepped outside. The cool evening air hit my face. The noise from the party faded behind us. For a moment, it felt like the world had stopped. My father stared at the ground. Then he sighed. "I owe you an apology." I honestly wasn't prepared for those words. Not from him. Not ever. My father wasn't the kind of man who admitted mistakes. In our family, he was always right. Always confident. Always certain. Yet, here he was, looking like a man carrying years of regret. He rubbed the back of his neck. "When you were younger, I thought success only looked one way." I stayed silent. He continued. "I thought money was everything. His voice cracked slightly. And because of that, I spent years treating you like your accomplishments didn't matter. Every painful memory came flooding back. The jokes, the comparisons, the laughter, the humiliation, the countless family dinners where I felt invisible, the tears I cried alone after pretending everything was fine. I folded my arms. Do you know how many times you called my degree a waste? His face tightened. I could see the guilt immediately. More than once. More than once? I laughed bitterly. Dad, you said it for years. He lowered his head, and for the first time, I didn't protect him from the truth. You made me feel like I was a disappointment. The words came out stronger than I expected. You made me question myself. I felt my throat tighten. There were nights I wondered if I'd ruined my life. His eyes widened. I don't think he'd ever realized how deep the damage went. Parents often assume their words disappear. They don't. Children carry them for decades, even when they become adults, even when they become successful. Some wounds stay hidden. My father looked devastated. I never wanted that. Intentions don't erase consequences. The sentence landed hard. Because it was true. For years, my father had measured me against my siblings. Not because he hated me, but because he genuinely believed he was pushing me towards success. The problem was that his definition of success was incredibly narrow. Anything outside it didn't count, even his own daughter. For several moments, he didn't speak. Then he asked quietly, "When did all this happen?" I knew exactly what he meant. The deal, the company, the recognition, the success. I smiled sadly. It didn't happen overnight. He listened. And for the first time in my life, he truly listened. I told him about the years of research, the sacrifices, the failures, the late nights, the setbacks, the moments nobody saw, the moments nobody celebrated, the moments that happened while everyone else was busy dismissing me. When I finished, his eyes were wet. I didn't know. A part of me wanted to say, "You never bothered to ask," but I didn't, because at that moment, I realized something important. The greatest revenge wasn't hurting him. The greatest revenge was becoming undeniable. The greatest revenge was succeeding without his approval. For years, I'd imagined some dramatic confrontation, some moment where I embarrassed him the way he'd embarrassed me. But standing there, I didn't feel victorious. I felt free, because his opinion no longer controlled my happiness. That was the real victory. Not the money. Not the company, not the headlines. Freedom. My father wiped his eyes. Then he said something that shocked me. I was wrong. 3 simple words. Yet they carried more weight than all the praise I'd received that evening. I was wrong about your degree. He swallowed hard. I was wrong about your career. Another pause. And I was wrong about you. For a second, neither of us moved. Then he stepped forward and hugged me. I hadn't hugged my father like that in years. Not really, not genuinely. I felt decades of tension breaking apart, not disappearing completely. Some wounds take time, but breaking apart, and sometimes that's enough. When we returned inside, people immediately noticed something had changed. My father walked straight toward the center of the room. Then he picked up the microphone. The room quieted. Again. Only this time, what happened next surprised everyone, including me. He cleared his throat. "I'd like to say something." People turned toward him. My father looked directly at me. Then he addressed the crowd. "Earlier tonight, several people congratulated me." He paused. "But I think they've been congratulating the wrong person." The room became silent. I spent years believing success only came in certain forms. His voice echoed through the venue. I spent years praising some accomplishments while overlooking others. I felt my heart pounding. My father continued, "And because of that, I failed to appreciate one of the most remarkable people in my life." Several guests glanced toward me. I could hardly breathe. Then he pointed directly at me. "My daughter." The room turned. Every eye focused on me. For once, I wanted to disappear, but I couldn't. My father smiled. A real smile, not a polite one. Not a performative one, a proud one. The truth is that Emily has achieved something extraordinary. His voice cracked slightly, and I should have recognized it years ago. I saw my mother begin crying. Then my grandmother. Then, unexpectedly, my brother and sister. The room erupted into applause. Not polite applause. Not obligated applause. Genuine applause. For the first time in my life, I wasn't being compared. I wasn't being measured. I wasn't being judged. I was simply being seen. After the speech, dozens of people approached me. Relatives who barely spoke to me before. Friends of my parents. Business executives. Neighbors. Everyone wanted to talk, but the most meaningful conversation happened later that night. Grandma found me sitting alone near the patio. She slowly lowered herself into the chair beside me. "You okay?" I laughed. "I think so." She smiled knowingly. "I told you he'd regret it someday." I laughed again. "You did." She squeezed my hand. Then she said something I'll never forget. "Success isn't proving people wrong." I looked at her. "It's proving yourself right." That sentence stayed with me because she was right. The company mattered. The recognition mattered. The financial success mattered. But those things weren't the true ending of my story. The true ending happened long before that. It happened every morning I chose not to quit. Every time I ignored the criticism. Every time I kept going despite feeling unsupported. Every time I believed in myself when nobody else did. The deal with the $10 billion company didn't create my worth. It revealed it. Months later, Petnova officially launched the first major phase of the project based on my research. The results exceeded expectations. The technology expanded nationwide, then internationally. My career grew faster than I ever imagined. I paid off every student loan, bought my dream home, built financial security I once thought was impossible. Yet the most surprising change happened within my family. My father started asking questions about my work. Real questions. He wanted to understand. He wanted to learn. Sometimes he'd call just to hear how things were going. My mother became one of my biggest supporters. My siblings stopped seeing me as the different one. For the first time, we felt like equals. Not because I became richer, not because I became famous, but because people finally recognized value that had always been there. Looking back now, I sometimes think about that younger version of myself. The girl crying alone after hearing her father call her degree a waste. If I could speak to her today, I'd tell her this. Keep going. The people doubting you aren't living your life. You are. Their limits don't define your future. Your passion isn't a weakness. Your purpose isn't a mistake. And one day, the very thing they laughed at may become the reason the world respects you. My parents once called my veterinary degree a waste. Today, they keep a framed newspaper article about my work in their living room. Every visitor sees it. Every guest asks about it. And every single time, my father proudly says the same thing. That's my daughter. The words arrived years later than they should have. But when they finally came, they meant everything.